Okay, so we're going over test 89, game 3 today. I really like this game. I don't know why. I think it's a fairly easy game 3. I think most game 3s can be kind of difficult and challenging, but this one I think it's an easier game 3 that we will usually see. And I'll point out the factors that kind of make it a game 3. There are some different or I guess I should say more difficult factors involved in this, but I think it's fairly easy for you to get the hang of. So we have a computer forensics laboratory is assigning 5 technicians. We have R, S, T, W, and X to examine the data on 3 computers. We have F, G, H. Each technician will be assigned to at least 1 computer. So that's telling me I'm going to have to use these at least once. And each computer will be examined by exactly 2 technicians. So the moment it tells me an exact number, I'm just going to put my dashes down just because I know that I won't be exceeding that. When I fill up those 2 spots, I can't do anything else. So now the reason why this becomes a game level 3 is because if you look at the variables that we only have 5 variables, but yet we have 6 spaces and we have to have exactly 2 technicians. So we couldn't have like just 1 technician looking at 1 computer. We have to have exactly 2. So technically we actually have 6 variables that we're working with. One of our variables is going to repeat itself. In a game where you have repeated variables, this is how it'll kind of hint it at that you're repeating variables if it's not outright saying it. Most games are going to have more spots open than variables. That's kind of when you know that you're going to have some repeated variables. The way that I attack this is I just keep an open space over here. And so when I'm placing my variables, I can know that, let's say I place R here, I can cross out my R here, but I can still pop in an extra R over here. So it kind of gives me a reminder, a visual reminder that I do have one more variable that I can add in there. So I think that's what makes this more of a game 3 than like a typical game 2, game 1. This is what makes it a little more challenging of a grouping game because we're having that repeated variable. Okay, we'll go straight into the rules. This time I'm just going to go all the way down the rules, talk about each rule, and then we'll kind of pick the most restrictive rule and work from there. So the first rule says if S examines F, X examines G. So these if then rules, so like rule number 1 and rule number 2, the if is so, I guess I shouldn't say that. It's not telling you it has to go in there. So S does not have to examine F. It's a possibility. So S could examine G and H if we're having that duplicated variable. S does not have to go into F. So I'm going to write this off to the side and I write my rules like my diagrams are set up. So I'm going to say basically if S is under F, then we're going to have X under G. And that way, when I'm looking at where my variables are placed, if I see that S is under F, it's a lot easier for me to notice that this is a rule that I have to apply rather than writing it in some subscript way like F or S or something like that. It's easier for your mind to kind of transfer it. So we do the same thing for rule number 2, which it's the same thing except just different variables. So we have if W examines F, then we have X examining H. I'm going to write it the same way. Okay, I'm going to go to my third variable. Third rule, I guess I should say that the reason why I'm not really stopping at any of these rules is it's just a possibility. So technically S could go in F, S could go in G and H and not F, S could be duplicated. You have a lot of different possibilities with these first 2 rules. So it's not really a good rule to start your worlds off of because it's nothing like concrete. It creates a lot of different worlds. I guess I should just say that. Because like I said, we could have S just by itself, or S could be that duplicate variable. So technically your worlds are basically multiplied by 2 just because you have the possibility of it being duplicated. I'm not in the mood to start a game off like that and looking for something a little more concrete. So something that is telling me where a variable goes, or I'm looking for blocks. where I only have about 3 options that I could put a variable in. So that's basically what I'm looking for. Rule number 3 says no computer is examined by both S and W. So telling me S and W hate each other. I cannot have them together. Pretty simple rule. I'm just going to write it like that for right now. Again, not a good rule to start with because that leads so many different possibilities of where your variables can go. We just know that S and W hate each other. Doesn't really give us a good starting point. But rule number 4 does. And some people get tripped up on rule number 4. So we'll break this down. So rule number 4 says exactly one computer is examined by both R and T. So R and T are going to cover one computer. Now, the reason why a lot of people get tripped up with this is they think that R and T only happen once, and they could be split up together or something like that. Or if I have R and T here, could one of them be my repeated variable? And the answer is yes. R could be your duplicated variable. And the reason is because it has both. So it's specifying that exactly one computer is both of them. So I'm only looking for R and T happening one time together. So it's not excluding R and T being the solo duplicated variable as well. So this is a pretty good rule to start with, because if you think about that only one computer can have, exactly one computer can have R and T together, and I only have 3 computers, that means R and T can only go in 3 spots. So I'm going to create 3 different worlds, well, 2 additional worlds. So I'm going to have one where R and T are in F, R and T are in G, and R and T are in H. Now I don't have to think about that rule anymore. I can just completely cross it off my list. I don't have to worry about it. Great. The next rule I'm going to go into, I think you could start with rule 1 or rule 2. I don't think it really matters because it's pretty much the same rule, and nothing like is domino affected into another rule. Rule 3, I'm just going to kind of leave to the side and make sure that I kind of notice it when I'm placing my variables. There's really not much you can do in rule 3. So we're going to go into rule 1 and rule 2, and we're going to kind of work at them together. Usually I don't recommend this, but in this case, I think it's easier to look at them together because S and W hate each other. And so if we can figure out where S and W go, if they're going in that F spot or not, I think it's a lot easier to go about it like that. So for example, in our first world, R and T are in F, which means that rule 1 and rule 2 have no implications on world 1, because there's no way that S and W can go into F. So that tells me that if S and W hate each other, I don't necessarily care where they go, but they're going to flip-flop between G and H. The other way you can write it, if this doesn't make sense to you, is you can write it something like this. They're flip-flopping with one another. I personally like this just because I can see that S has the possibility of going in both those places. But those are like the kind of ways that you can write it. My next world is world number 2. So this is going into rule number 1. If we know that S can go into F or H, those are my only 2 open spots, I'm going to make another world. Well, I guess, yeah, I'll do it this way, and then I'll explain a shortcut. So S can either go into F or S can go into H. And so when we know that S is an F, that means that G is going to have to house X. And I have no spot for X over here. So this is kind of the shortcut that I was alluding to. If you can automatically notice that, if I think about mentally that S is going to go into F, do I even have a spot for X in G? I don't necessarily have to create those 2 worlds. In the beginning stages of getting used to building worlds and stuff like that, I would definitely continue splitting them just so you get comfortable with it and you don't forget about this possibility of S going into H. But if you notice that shortcut, take it by all means. So this world does not exist anymore. Cannot happen. So S is going to have to go into H, which means that if S hates W, then W is going to have to go into F, which triggers the second rule. You see what I mean? How they kind of like complement each other almost. So we'll slap W in there, which means that second rule is triggered. X is going to go into H. Yay. Now we're going to focus on the third world. We'll come back to the other worlds and fill in those remaining spots, but we're going to take it step by step. Move that over a little bit. Okay. So in this world, we can kind of do the same thing. So I'll show you the shortcut method and then I'll break them up. So if S is in F, I do have a spot for X being in G. If W is in F, I don't have a spot for X and H. So that automatically tells me that W is going to have to go into G, which is going to force S to go into F. If we were to break it up, we can look at it as W and F. Those were the two possibilities for W. W's and F, that triggers that second rule. I no longer have a spot for X and H, which means it's dead. So you can see how it shaves off maybe a few seconds. It's not necessary to kind of try to make that leap, but it is helpful. For space, I'm erasing that. Okay, and so that means that S is in F, which is going to trigger that first rule, which means that X is going to be housed in G. So now I have completed rule 1 and 2. And now all I have to worry about is this S and W. And the reason why I'm keeping this around is because I still have some spots underneath them. And I just have to make sure that I'm not going to violate that rule. So typically when we have empty spots like this, it means that anyone can go in there. But in this case, because S can't go with W, I'm going to write out to the side that R, T, or X is going to fall into this place. You could also write something like S can't go there. I like to see what can go there rather than what can't go there. So I'm going to write it like this. I'm going to do the same thing down here. We know that W can't go there. So that means it's going to lead to R, T, and X. So we have our first two worlds completed. Our first world is going to be a little different because we don't really know where S and W are, but that doesn't really change anything because they're going to have to go there, which means that whoever else goes, well, how am I going to put this? It doesn't matter where they go because it's going to exclude S or W from going into one of these spots because we hate, or S and W hate each other, and we can't have two variables with the same computer because we can't have one technician fill two spots. The game's not allowing us to do that. If it was allowed, it would have stated it. So basically S and W are just completely not allowed in those two spots. But we're still missing one of our variables because we still have to follow the rule that each technician is assigned to at least one computer. And so the one variable that we're missing is X. Again, doesn't matter where it goes, could go into G or H. And then we have our duplicate variable, which leads to be R, T, and X. Because we don't, S and W are not an option, which only leave R, T, and X. And so technically, it could be true that X is happening right next to each other. It's totally fine. So technically, I don't need to worry about that anymore because all my spaces are filled. And that's the game. This game really only has these three worlds. If this arrow is a little more confusing to you, if you can't see that flipping mentally, break it up again so you can see it. It takes all of 5 seconds to make the world. So break it up, make it easy on yourself. Okay, now we're going to go into questions. Actually, I can just erase all of this. And okay, so like I said, or like I've said in the past, our first question is a list question. This is typically what you'll get as your first question. Also, sorry, I cut onions before this, and I think it's still lingering. So my eyes are like burning. Okay. So your list question, rather than going over your worlds and matching them, we're going to go through our rules and eliminate the ones that are violating it. So I'm going to go through rule 1 and I'm going to go through all my answer choices and cross out the ones that are violating it. So if S examines F, I'm going to see where that happens. That's an A and E. That means that X examines G. That eliminates E because I don't see X and G. That keeps A because I do have X and G. Next rule, W examines F. That's only happening in D. So I better find X and H, which I don't. So I'm going to eliminate that one. No computer is examined by both S and W. That's going to eliminate B. Can't have S and W there. Exactly one computer is examined by both R and T. And A is eliminated. I don't have R and T together, but in C, I do have R and T. So this is going to be our answer. And we can double check our world and our answer choice. If this is the correct answer, we should be able to find it over here. And it looks like we have it right here. It's kind of a little bit hard to see. So we have R and T, we could have W and X, and we could have S and X here. So it is a possibility. Okay. Question 14 says, if both R and T examine G, which one of the following must examine A or F? So this is an if question, and it's a must be true question. So the first part of our if is we're going to locate in our world where that happens. So R and T examining G, where can I make that happen? Looks like that only happens in 4. And it's a must be true. So that means that it has to be true 100% of the time. So automatically, I can just predict this answer choice. It's going to be W. Because if we're looking at F, any one of these 3 variables can fill in that second spot, but W is always going to be under F. So because it's always going to be true, that means that D is our answer. Any of the following could be true except. Okay, so 4 of our answer choices can be true. The correct answer choice, the one that we're looking for, is the one that cannot be true. It's the exception to our possibilities. So I'm going to go through my answer choices, see what can be true. I'm going to eliminate them, and that's going to weed out the one that can't happen. So A says one of the computers is examined by both R and X. Can that happen? I'm not seeing that anywhere. I like A so far. Scares me when it's A or E, but I'm going to pick A for right now and go through B, C, D, and E and just make sure. One of the computers is examined by both S and T. I can make that happen. I can make that happen right here. And I just need it to happen once. So even though it could happen here, or I could flip T over here and have it in G, the fact that it happens one time and I figured it out for one time is enough to just move on. So I don't have to find out all the possibilities of S and T. So that eliminates B. One of the computers is examined by both S and X. Again, could happen here. Eliminating it because it can be true. We're looking for the exception. One of the computers is examined by both T and W. Can happen here. So I can eliminate that one. E, which one of the following, or one of the computers is examined by both W and X. Yeah, I can make that happen here. So A is going to be our answer choice because I can make D through E happen in my worlds. Next one. If W examines H, then any of the following could be true except. So saying question stem could be true except. So 4 of our answer choices can happen. The one that cannot happen is what we're going to select. And it's giving me an if, which means I'm going to locate that if first and then go into my answer choices. So if W examines H, that can happen here. And that's the only thing that can happen. So, but it's important to note because if W is going to go here, that's going to force S to go into G. And that could be important to know. That could be No, okay. That could be one of our answer choices is S's and G. But it's important to notice how picking certain variables in groups or assigning them into a certain place can affect other variables. Doesn't really affect anything down here, just forces that S to go into G. So we're looking for what could be true. R examines H. I don't have that happening. Again, I hate that it's A, but I don't have it happening. R can't go in. Oh, wait, sorry. R can go into H because it's a floater. Haha. R can go into H right here. So it can happen. So because it can happen, we'll eliminate that. S examines F. That's the one that cannot happen. If in this world, R and T are the ones that are examining F. So this is going to be my answer choice, but we'll go through C, D, and E. T examines G. Could happen. And this is what I mean by if it's hard for you to picture this, to write it out again, because we could flip T over here and have X be over here. That could totally happen. T examines H. Could happen. We can put H or T right there. X examines G. Could happen. So this is going to be my correct answer. Okay. Last question says the assignment of technicians of the computers is fully determined if which one of the following is true. Fully determined questions, a lot of students struggle with them, so be like gracious to yourself. They are some of the more difficult questions, but they can be super easy because I only have a two-step method to figuring this out if you've done your worlds completely. First step is to go through your answer choices. So like, let's look at answer choice A. So if we're looking at answer choice A, we're going to see if it comes up in two worlds. So both R and T examine G. Can I have that happen in two worlds? No, this only happens in one world. So I am good to move on to my second step. If it's only happening in one world, that means that there's no shift in a different world. So like R doesn't flip with W or S doesn't flip with W or anything like that. You have one world for a reason. However, the second part of that is, do you know where all of your variables are within that world? And we don't, because R, T, and X are flipping between each other. So because we can't pick who else is going to be with W, I can't say that everyone is completely determined. So this actually becomes a wrong answer choice. When you're looking for a completely determined answer, you're looking for something that you completely know where all of your variables are. You know who is in H, you know who is in G, you know who hates each other, you know who loves each other, and you don't have two possibilities. Hopefully that comes up in one of these because I want to talk about that. Okay, wait, no, it doesn't. Okay, B says both R and T examine H. We're going to go through our steps. Does it come from one world? I do have it from one world over here. Step 2, do I know where everyone is in that world? And I don't. Same reason as world number 4, R, T, and X are flipping between each other. I can't say who was paired with S, which means that it's not completely determined. Eliminates B. S and X examine G. That's happening in one world. If I put S and G, that means that W is going to go in H. So it's coming from one world, which is good, means we can move on to the next step. And I still don't know who is in that spot. Because even if I have S and X here, my R and T are going to flip-flop here. And even if I did S, X, W, X, because I could choose X right here and flip them, right? It means that it would create two different worlds. And so I guess this is kind of what I mean by when you have two different worlds, you're having two different worlds for a reason. Yeah. So I could instead, let me try to explain it this way. If I pick R, W and R are in H, S and X are in G, but S and X are still in G here, even if I choose W and X and H. So I have two different options. because this R and X are flipping each other. So I do not like this answer choice. It's kind of confusing with the double X for some reason. T and W examine G. Does it come from one world? I don't even have, oh wait, no, I do have a world. I can have W here, T here, which is going to force W to go here, S to go here. I like this world. It's coming from one world, and I can tell you who was in each computer, who is going on each computer. I don't know. I can say for sure R and T are in F, W and T are in G, and S and W are in H. So I like this. Oh, wait, no, wait. Why did I put W there? This is supposed to be X. S and X are in H. So I like this answer choice because I completely know where everyone is. It's only coming from one world. And I can say for a definite fact that W's in G, T's in G, S and X are in H. That kind of instance. Answer choice A, both W and X examine H. Okay, so I could have W and X here, which means that S is going to go over here, and this doesn't really matter. So the reason why this one isn't our correct answer is because I could still flip this. So I could have S and W here. I could still say that my for sure X is going to go into W, which is going to flip over our T and X over here, and I can pick any one of those. So I have these two different worlds basically happening. So that means that E is not our answer choice, which means that D is going to be our correct answer. Whoop. So that's the game. I think it's a fairly simple game, considering it's a game 3. Most game 3s are not this simple, I guess. They're usually a little more difficult. I think the most difficult part of this game is this flipping right here with our for sure X and then our duplicate variable. I think if you broke it out, it might make it a little bit easier if you struggled with looking at X flipping back and forth. But other than that, that's the game. If you have any questions, let me know. See you next week.